Computer-generated chess problem 2381 by Chesthetica. White has a rook, a pair of bishops, and a knight against black's rook and bishop. So white is ahead in material. However, white's rook on d6 is being threatened by the king. So how should white proceed here? Maybe bishop to b4, defending the rook, after which black might try bishop to e3 check, king to a6, bishop threatening the rook again, rook to d4, returning the favor, rook to e6 check, gaining a tempo, king to a7, maybe bishop to d6, knight to f8, king to d8, an exchange of pieces, rook on d6, and mate will soon follow. But like I usually ask, is there a better way? Let's take a closer look. Indeed there is, a much better way. A mate in 3 in fact. But how? Rook to d4. A quiet move. Now, not only was the rook threatened, but the bishop on e1 was also threatened, which means black can proceed with rook captures bishop. But that's okay, because now white simply moves the knight to any number of squares including c5, and if, let's say, bishop to e3, rook to d7 mates, if rook to e7, knight to a6 mates. You see, in this position, white could also play knight to b6, and the same threat will be there, because if bishop to b2, well then either rook to d7 or knight to a8, and if rook to e7, well then knight to a8 mate still wins. So the idea here was to realize that white only needs to maintain control of the d file because the black king is locked in. But why wouldn't something else work here? For example, rook to d1. That's because rook to d1 doesn't block bishop to e3 check. And as you can see now, there is no foreseeable mate. In fact, the position could be drawish. So it's very important that the rook move to d4, because this blocks the diagonal, the a7 g1 diagonal, which allows black to gain a tempo with check. And if here, let's say, rook captures knight, the other bishop that was also threatened by that same rook gives mate on a5. So it would seem that in this position, black would be rather quite surprised at how the tables suddenly turned with a move like this. I hope you enjoyed this one. I know I did.
Chesthetica's Book of Chess Constructs, Volumes 1 through 5. Available on Amazon.